Good morning and welcome to Sunrise Daily and Happy Workers' Day. I'm Neota Ibe.
Good morning, indeed. Happy Workers' Day. I'm Malkwe Yusuf.
Indeed. Happy Workers' Day, Nigerians. Happy Workers' Day to you too, Ayo.
Well, I wish you the same.
I am Bukola Koka.
Well, Workers' Day is only celebrated once in a year, and it's May 1, and that is today. Welcome to the program. I'm Ayo Makinde.
I'm talking about workers and what they have to go through every day, going from commuting from your house to where you have to work. Someone on a lighter note, someone said this morning that the staff actually are at home while the workers are working today. Swing it the other way. But whichever the case may be, the workers have to commute from one point to the other, and so the roads become very, very vital to get them to that point. Now, case in point being the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, that was huge challenge to people residing around the...
Did you say that was? Oh, you mean that is...
Well, okay, all right. I'm okay. I'm speaking in faith. Huge challenge for those that had to commute between which area now? Berger to the island, to even beyond Berger onto the Kara area, going towards a redeemed camp. It's a huge, going to Ibadan, it's a huge challenge that people have to go through every day. And you know, a lot of people live in that axis, and many of them work on the mainland and on the island, so they have to cross there every day to get to work every day, and it's been a huge challenge. I do understand the federal government's come to say that the completion date of May 30th, it's not exactly certain, but they've opened some portions and they've finished, and so they're taking
May 30th, was April?
Oh, May 30th. It's likely to may not be certain. I don't know. We'll need clarification on that. But then they've opened up some parts, like the Kara area, which is also a very busy spot. You also know that a lot of people live on both sides of that road, going back and forth. So it's a challenge that something needs to be done. Some of our colleagues were stuck on that point for hours on end, and I'm sure Ayo and Buki will tell us more about that when we get to them. But it's not been an easy task. So workers need to get to a point. Traders, those that have businesses, also need to get to where they're selling their products. So you find out that the roads are really, really vital, for there is no economy that can thrive without good roads and passable and workable roads.
Yeah, I was just trying to get a quick clarification. The deadline, the initial deadline they gave was April the 30th, which was yesterday.
And like that's not gonna
yeah, certainly it's not happening, or did not happen, but they have been able to finish a portion, the Kara end, which they have now opened to the public. So prayerfully, that should ease things up a bit. As you talked about workers going from one place to the other and having to use road infrastructure, workers use all manner of infrastructure and work in different ways. Even the people who are working on the road, they're workers. But, some workers drop the ball. And that's why sometimes, yes, we know that, construction comes with pain and, inconvenience. That's why oftentimes when you see a construction site, you will see, sorry for the inconvenience, bear with us, etc., etc. But beyond that, you have to ask whether the kind of pain that people have been through on that Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, something couldn't have been done to ease the pain a bit. You have to ask, about whether there were plans for traffic, for a contingency of traffic officials along that road, from the Ogun State, from the Lagos State government, from also the federal government. All three governments should have provided traffic workers along that stretch. There also have been like a meeting to ensure that, traffic in that area, people obeyed the rules. Because, of course, Lagosians, and I don't want to say just Lagosians, because if we're talking people from Ogun as well, they can't be qualified as Lagosians. Or would they fall into that part known as Greater Lagos? Because I do know that a certain part of Ogun State now is now being, classified as Greater Lagos. I don't know. Buki, you help me out here. But I have had to ask, is that there was nothing that they could have done about it to ease the pain? Well, only those who have been through it will be able to tell you. And I know that my colleagues, you guys are champs. In spite of all of that, you make it happen every morning, every day, without complaint. You're here. How have you done it?
Well, hearing you speak now, it reminds me of my experience earlier on down the line when I started broadcasting. It makes me wonder if my calling is to experiencing traffic. Because from the time of, working at Ikeja and living at Satellite Town, it was traffic all the way, on Lagos-Badagry Expressway. And this was about 20 years ago. So very little has changed on Lagos-Badagry Expressway if you consider that road has now become, a habitation for articulated vehicles on both sides of the divide. So nothing has changed 20 years down the line on Lagos-Badagry Expressway. When I worked at Ikeja at the time and lived at Satellite Town, my mom and I always had to pass the night much of the week at the office, and then transiting to working on Lagos-Badagry Ibadan Expressway now, very little has changed. I've always had to, manage the situation by residing sometimes at the office, just to ease that stress and be able to, maintain work-life balance. So for Lagos Ibadan Expressway, first of all, I think we should start with the good news, the good part of it. It will soon be delivered. Well, the cost is another matter entirely because it was re-awarded by the Goodluck Jonathan administration at the cost of over 315 billion naira. So what it's amounting to at the end of the day, when it is delivered, either by the Buhari administration or the Tinubu administration, well, we're going to start that conversation at a later date. I had cause to experience what my other colleagues here at Channels Television are experiencing on Saturday when I had to walk. I am telling you, I walked from Otedola Bridge to Baga, and then I took a bike just to get to the office. Yes, I took a bike just to get to the office, just to, break it down for you in practical terms. That's what Nigerians are going through. I recall that I had to take a cab on my way down, and, the cab driver was saying that, look, madam, this place has become another Apapa, right now. That's, how difficult the experience is. But the good thing is that it will soon be delivered, and all of the pains that Nigerians have been experiencing will soon come to an end. Well, and just to add, Ayo, that, we thank FIRMA for, the work that is being done on our road here at Channels Television. But the last time I checked, this road is a Trunk B road. So we'll appreciate that magnanimity, that generosity for the, those roads on the earth side of both sides of the Lagos Ibadan Expressway. So you want the Lagos Ibadan Expressway annex? When there is, yes, no, not an annex. I know it's a matter of jurisdiction between the Lagos and the federal government, but such that when they have cause to embark on another rehabilitation work in the future, the traffic congestion on the main road would not be a problem.
The challenge, Bukola, is it never should have gotten this bad. That's the point. So when you're giving that kudos to FIRMA, I think FIRMA should have started this work a long time ago. Why? Because it's a federal road maintenance agency, and they're supposed to have a plan, a standing plan for rehabilitating roads before it gets as bad as it did. I mean, if these roads had been fixed in sections over time, we will not have a situation where you are fixing a 127-point-something kilometer road at once. Don't forget this road work is 24 years old. It was started by the Obasanjo government in this republic, and you rightly said it, 10 years ago, the Goodluck Jonathan administration re-awarded it. So all of those conversations are very important to understand. I mean, it's cheering. Well, on April 30, the road from Kara Bridge to the toll gate in Ibadan, we can say that the federal government delivered that one. What is remaining now, according to the Federal Ministry of Works on our news at 10 yesterday, you may go back to check it, is just about 3 kilometers.
Yeah, 2 kilometers outbound Lagos, 1 kilometer.
1 kilometer inbound. So 3 kilometers in total remaining. That's good news. But there is also the Ibadan section that is also uncompleted as at this time. So when you're talking about Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, there's the Lagos end, there's the Ibadan end. But in between the roads, I traveled on that road last week, or was it last week or 2 weeks ago? It was actually very good. Has been very well delivered. And that's not all that the federal government is doing. Kano, I think, yes, is one of about the biggest road that the federal government is talking about. The second Niger bridge is there, and the local Oweto bridge has been delivered, thankfully. So a lot has been done, a lot of wins have been achieved, but there is always more. And Mark, you are spot on when you say, is there anything that could have been done to ease? Yes. Communicate. That's the least we can do. Let people know what is happening. At least they will know, okay, this is the situation we're in now. This is the progress we're making. This is the challenge people are having. Let's not be reactive. Let's be proactive. Let people know that you know what they're going through. And then I think
which is what has been missing for some time
which
on
has been
Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. And just to add that if they're going to do support infrastructure, you know, on Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, there is a dire need for that. I know it's going to be a matter of jurisdiction yet again, but when you talk about Wawa, Arepo, Magboro, there are communities springing up on either side of the expressway. Those communities need pedestrian bridges such that, you know, commerce can be facilitated and ease of commuting can also become you know, something that the people can make use of instead of crossing that expressway, which leads to a lot of accidents. And talking about delivery dates, yet again, they may miss another delivery date if they don't become creative about embarking on that exercise, which is working at night. We can't say that enough. There should be a partnership with the security agencies such that, you know, that work can be facilitated. The workers can be, you know, can work conveniently at night. But then again, we're grateful for, you know, the progress of work achieved so far.
Okay, well, federal, then the state governments have their work cut out for them as well. Nyota?
Indeed, they have their work cut out for them. And we have ours cut out for us as we take a look at what the papers are saying today. And I'm starting with the Abuja Inquirer. And they're focused on crisis. They call it a civil war in the Niger Delta Development Commission. That's the main headline on the Abuja Inquirer. And the writers, let me just hold that up for you. I didn't make that up. Civil war in NDDC. Chairman disowns $15 billion rail contract. No contract awarded yet. Management. Onochie desperate to be executive chair. Stakeholders. When would the crisis or the seeming instability in the Niger Delta Development Commission end? Because it's actually distracting from the task at hand. We're talking about work here. Are these workers even thinking about the work they have to do? It's about the money. Above the nameplate, you have fear grips Abuja over gruesome murder of 2 women. Insecurity, another matter. Police keep mum. Check page 3 for that. That NDDC story continues on page 3 from the front page. And I think something should be done real quick to ensure that. Oh yeah, this one, page 8. 60,000 candidates retake UTME over technical challenges. I'm thinking that since we already have our devices, computers, and many of us have internet at home, won't it just be easy to just sit down at home? I mean, we all take exams in our different houses online. Can't we just get this sorted out one time for all? You sit down in your house, take your exam, get your results, and move on. Why do we have to gather? Okay.
I know that we've made significant progress. JAM is one of the places where we've made significant progress. But
I agree.
We'll certainly get there, I believe so. Because don't forget that not a lot of people, not everybody has got a computer. So some people, even, they're being introduced to computers. And I know you told me about the phone. But it will surprise you that a phone and a computer, some people have held a phone all of their lives, and it should be sometimes all of the small, cheap phones, you know, that just enables you to call. It might not be internet enabled. So, yes, we're growing, but not everybody is not growing at the same rate. So let us hope that,
different sizes for different people. Yeah. So if you do not have a device to take the exam on your own, then come to this center. That will reduce the pressure on the different centers. Let's be innovative. And that's it from the Abuja Inquirer.
Well, let's take a look at what the Vanguard newspapers has for you this morning. It says, May Day, it's been terrible, agonizing for workers. That's according to the Nigerian Labour Congress. Well, I can certainly say that for those who've had to fly Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. Yes, I can say that. And then when you look at, they have riders there as workers in oil, electricity, maritime, other sectors grieve over continuous misery, poverty, hopelessness. Ask government to address poverty, insecurity, unemployment, inflation, high cost of living.
Isn't that too much for government to address? Just asking.
Well, there's some things that if you address one, it tends to, attend to others. So government itself needs to be smart in terms of how it addresses some of the things that it addresses. And then you also see their set agenda for incoming government. The story is on page 5 of the paper. Take a look at all the stories here. Inflation, high interest rates drive stock market loss, excuse me, to 1.01 trillion naira in April. Market loses over 70% of first quarter gains. Analysts disagree on outlook for May. So page 19 is where you'll find details there. We've been keeping our tabs on Sudan for you, and this is what you'll find. 637 Nigerians arrive Egyptian border. Envoy assures parents, students. So page 8 is where you'll find details. Well, apart from assurances, we just want to see them back home, really. That's all we want. Page 8 is where you find details. And then, of course, you see this. Lagos-Ibadan Expressway, federal government apologizes over failure to meet deadline. So they released a statement yesterday, and in that statement, they did acknowledge that they failed to meet the deadline. I think that there's enough blame to go all around. But at the end of the day, let us hope that the entire stretch of work will be delivered in time for workers to be able to use it. Or for everybody, not just workers, every single person to be able to use it. Page 10 is where you find details. Let us leave it there for Vanguard newspapers.
And flip to The Guardian. But just before, looking at the stories on the front page of The Guardian, I can't help but think about Nigerian students at the Egyptian border right now. If they've been there since Friday evening or early Saturday morning, that's about 3 days of living on the border. How are they freshening up? Do they have food? Because a lot of them have run out of money. And when will they get that permit to cross over and be airlifted, following the intervention promised by Air Peace? Just some things for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to think about, such that that situation can be resolved as soon as possible. Look at the Guardian newspaper this morning. The front page, talks about Nigerian workers. Workers lament 8 years of unkept promises as minimum wage loses value. Details you'll find on page 6 of The Guardian, and really that's at the heart of the matter. How much eventually does 30,000 naira get to when you have to consider the ricochet effect of the continuous increase of the pump price of petrol? So what can 30,000 naira do? Take a look at other stories this morning. You'll find this one. Why Lagos fan demolished buildings in Ajao Estate. We saw that story over the weekend, and we saw those expensive buildings go down. But the details, will sort of justified. Some of them are built on pipelines, and the state government has intervened to avert what would seem like a disaster waiting to happen. Let's take a look at some more stories. Over 2,500 undocumented Nigerian students stranded in Sudan universities. We had that clarification from government officials yesterday about the breakdown of the amount paid for each bus. Of course, we'll be talking about that much later on the program. And finally, Nigeria loses $4.5 billion yearly to foreign artisans in construction industry. This is an interesting one, Ayo, if you consider some of our, highways, the construction of our highways at the hands of foreign construction firms. And indeed, other ambitious projects like rails, go to foreign construction firms. So Nigeria's engineering industry, so to speak, the indigenous engineering community is losing out on the gains from the construction industry. So this figure is realistic.
But I guess it's up to them to decide whether or not they can take these things over, because they were there. And there are members of these associations that you talk about in the ministries, departments, and agencies. So they have to know whether or not their people can deliver. Well, talking about money, Nigerian News Direct has on its front page one big headline: no plan to phase out redesigned Naira notes. That's the lead story of the Nigerian News Direct this morning. The story, details of it you'll find on page 3 of the paper this morning. And guess what? The questions will still abound as to, so does that mean we don't have new notes anymore? Or we just, the old and the new are going to go pari passu forever?
Side by side?
I don't know, but that's a question for the CBN to answer.
Will the CBN be abiding by the final Supreme Court verdict, which ensured the validity of the old Naira notes up until December? So what happens in December 2023?
Well, I'm pretty sure that the details of this will be on page 3 of the Nigerian News Direct and in any other media that you have access to on the story. You can find out the details of it. Nigerian News Direct this morning brings close to a look at some of the papers this morning. We're back right after now to delve into the issues for the day. One of them, Bukola already teased you. Be right back.
Do you know how much it takes to hire a bus from Khartoum to the border?
About 1,000 kilometers.
$30,000 per bus. $30,000 per bus times 40 buses. Can somebody, any good mathematician amongst you?
1.2 billion.
That is not billion.
Yes.
That is where your 1.2 million comes into. We now mobilized the first tranche approved by federal government out of this, which is $400,000, and transferred it. If you take out $400,000, what does it come to?
800,000.
No, 1/3
Yes.
of the total. Once they gave us 13 buses, 13 buses times $30,000 is how much? 390. 30. Can somebody calculate for me?
That's
390 is correct, sir.
390. They stopped giving us. You remember I told you they gave us 13,000. They're supposed to give us 13 point something buses. They kept the 10,000. When you're traveling in Sudan, you don't enter a bus and start going. You must load it with water and biscuits. Yes. Believe me, I just became an expert on Sudan overnight because every day we discuss with them. And they told us our money is finished, bring another money.
Professor Femi Otubanjo joins us this morning. He's a professor of international politics and strategic studies, Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. He joins us virtually to discuss this. Good morning, Prof, and thank you so much for joining us. What's your assessment to begin with? Yes, sir. Of what's your assessment of the rescue or the evacuation efforts so far with the activities of the federal government?
Well, you know, in this kind of situations where there's an outbreak of violence, war, or almost like urban violence, it is difficult to determine when to evacuate. Determining when to and when not to. If you do it too quickly, which means that if the exchange of violence and fire ceases after 2 days, then you would have wasted everybody's time and resources that you put into it. Don't forget that evacuating people means dislodging them, almost disrupting their life, stopping their education, their businesses, wrenching them away from their resources, their assets, and so on. So you need to be careful that you do not do it too soon. But if you do it too late, then you end up with disaster. You might lose lives and so on. So when you see some delays in evacuating, it is not necessarily because of incompetence or indifference. It's a matter of assessing when it's appropriate to evacuate. Having done so, having now agreed to evacuate, decided to evacuate, who should do it? What I see here from the little clip that I saw is that there's a jurisdictional squabble here in Nigeria. The Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, the Nigerian Diaspora Commission, NEMA, the Ministry of External Affairs are all hustling to take control of this process. It is not the business of any other agency than the Ministry of External Affairs. I was watching the permanent secretary excitedly talking about this. The money is available. The Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs is a domestic ministry. They are supposed to come and to look after those people when they arrive.
Prof,
when
just 1 second. My apologies. Just to be
the
clear.
resources that are available.
Prof, can you hear me?
We discovered that the fight
just
is
just
about...
1 second, Prof, if you can hear me, so that
yes.
this response you're giving can be actually quite well understood by people. It's a concern that has been raised quite a bit by a number of people as well. We're hearing the voice of NITCOM quite prominently. We're hearing the voice of NEMA quite prominently. We're hearing the voice of the Foreign Affairs Ministry quite prominently. We're hearing the voice of the Humanitarian Affairs Ministry quite prominently, and just over the past few days we began to hear the voice of the embassy in Sudan, the ambassador in Sudan. 5 authorities speaking on this issue, almost speaking discordantly, and everyone, as you said, jostling for authority. Just to be clear, because NEMA, for instance, is under the Humanitarian Affairs Ministry. NITCOM is operating through the Foreign Affairs Ministry, or so to speak. The embassy in Sudan operates with the Foreign Affairs Ministry, so to speak. So exactly who should be speaking? Who should be saying what? The affairs that concern the humanitarian affairs, who should be talking about it? You said it's the Foreign Affairs Ministry that we should be hearing. Is it the Foreign Affairs that should be talking about everything? Just to be clear, who should be taking the lead and prominent on this issue?
Yeah, obviously the Ministry of External Affairs. These other agencies are not known to international system. They are domestic institutions. The Ministry of External Affairs, through our embassy in Sudan, the ministry is the key actor here. All these other agencies can subscribe through the ministry. When you now have the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs going to charter buses in Sudan, where is the embassy? What do you have the embassy for? It is not the business of that ministry. And that's what you get from Nigerian politics and from that scramble to control money. What you are finding is that the focus is not on the people, the objective, but on the control of the resources. So that creates its own problem. So the Ministry of External Affairs has to put pressure on the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs to release money that should normally have gone to it. But because of political connections, some ministries get the money that should go to another ministry. And then you begin to have this delay in terms of when do you release money, who do you give money to? It is not the business of humanitarian affairs. I'm sorry, that's the way that's not the way it should be. And that is part of the reasons why we have this delay. Now the Ministry of the Embassy has been talking, is the one inviting the students to go and congregate in 2 universities where they will be taking. The Ministry of External Affairs, the Embassy is the one that will negotiate with the Egyptian at the border about visas and accommodation and all those things, not humanitarian affairs. Nobody knows them abroad.
Well, just a quick one on that one.
Right.
Yeah, just a quick one on that same issue you're raising. When we had this conversation with an official of NEMA in, I think it was last week, he is already in Cairo at this moment. And what he said was that, hey, we did this before when we evacuated Nigerians from Ukraine. We can do it again. That's what we are doing now. We will get our children home safely. So it would seem like it's a system that's perpetuated over time. And you say it is the reason for this delay.
Yeah, if you have done it, if you have done the wrong thing before, and we do it, and that is a common thing in Nigeria, we continue to repeat the wrong thing. It doesn't make it right. But that you have done it before, the wrong precedent does not translate into the right procedure. The Ministry NEMA is not supposed to jump ahead. That's what we find, because at the end of the day, the officials are going to get extra code. They are going to stay in 5-star hotels. They're going to benefit individually, and so they jump into issues that are not their own. NEMA is a domestic management agency, emergency management agency, not an international agency. We have an embassy. The embassy will liaise with the ministry. The ministry will liaise with other agencies, including the military. If it requires military aircrafts to go and evacuate it is the ministry, not these agencies. They have no local standard. We must continue to do. If you don't do things right, we'll get the wrong results. And that, I'm not saying this is responsible for the delay, but these are delay factors. And if we are seeing delays, part of the reason is that we are giving money to Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, who is now releasing money piecemeal. Right? When you say you have 1.2 million allocated to evacuation, and you are telling us that you have spent exactly 1.2 million on renting buses.
Prof, now that you raise the point,
money for other things.
Pardon me, Prof, if I may come in there. Now that you raised the point about the Humanitarian Affairs Ministry being a domestic ministry, I wonder if their novelty in Sudanese affairs, perhaps is responsible for the figure, given by the federal government has been the amount expended on this evacuation exercise, because at the time that report, came about, Nigerians raised eyebrows about that sum, that it was rather expensive, but that both sides of the debate about that sum. Could it have been, less expensive if this venture was carried out, was executed by the Foreign Affairs Ministry through the Nigerian diplomatic mission in Sudan?
The issue is not about whether it's expensive or not. It's not that. It is that the wrong agency should be allowed to manage it. The money should not have been released to humanitarian affairs. If humanitarian affairs is going to be concerned, it is when those people arrive in Nigeria that you now give them humanitarian support. The Ministry of External Affairs has all the facilities, the consular facilities, and so on, to do all these things. We don't need NEMA and NITCOM, all of them muscling in, which is what we do in Nigeria. But because people have privileged opportunities in Abuja, they can get this money out and put and try to unfortunately push the appropriate agency aside. It's a matter of political influence at play here. Those who can get money approval from the president. not those who are supposed to do it. If people are supposed, have you heard, go and look at evacuation. Over 20, 25 countries have evacuated their citizens. Is there a scramble by agencies? It is the embassy that invites the military to bring whatever they want to bring. C-130 helicopters, whatever lorries, buses, to evacuate themselves, because the embassy collects information from these people, knows where they are, and has a way of communicating with them to go to the staging posts. It is the embassy that has all the information that it transmits to the parent
Prof,
body.
let's look at the mode of transportation. You know, some have talked about how clumsy this land transportation has been and the attendant dangers involved. And we've seen how other countries have chosen to evacuate their citizens by transporting them by sea. If you look at the topography and the geography, of the region itself, should Nigeria have explored and been creative by, looking at other options of transporting and evacuating their citizens?
Who can bring their planes and so on. But one of the things that you have to know is that evacuation in such a situation requires negotiation. People have to get passes. You have to be able to use the Khartoum airport is not operational, but there are alternative airports in Khartoum and surrounding towns. So you have to be able to negotiate that. That can only be done by our embassy. But it's not even safe to send your planes where jets are flying and bombers are flying around. So what you do is to use the safest form of transportation. And for now, the bus, the road transportation is the safest because to get them to the nearest country, which is Egypt, or to Ethiopia.
All right.
So I think there's nothing wrong in using buses to transport people. And of course, when you look at the numbers of people that you have, how many planes do you want to understand that 1,600 people were in the first batch, and altogether we have more than 5,000 students in Sudan. And so you can hardly do that with aircrafts.
Okay.
In any case, it is unsafe to use aircrafts. And so the best thing is to first evacuate them to the nearest point, and then use aircraft to move them from Egypt or from Ethiopia.
Yeah. My sincere apologies, Prof. We are completely out of time, but if you can do this in 10 seconds, do you think the embassy in Sudan is funded well enough for this operation?
Well, if they're not getting part of this money, they cannot be funded. No embassy is funded well in Nigeria. In any of our embassies, you can go and have the story is out of financial disaster. So when they get to this emergency, they need extra money to be able to do it.
Okay.
And if you give that extra money to another agency, then you are making them useless.
We have to thank you very much this morning, Professor Femi Otubanjo, Professor of International Politics and Strategic Studies, Nigeria Institute of International Affairs. Thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thank you for having me. Have a happy Workers' Day.
And you too, sir. Well, that's too much of that. We're back right after now to take on other issues. Please stay with us.
Every May 1st is considered the International Workers' Day, a day set aside to celebrate the rights of workers and recognize their role in nation building. Nigeria joins the rest of the world in celebrating that day, and we take a moment to look at how the Nigerian worker is faring. I mean, when we started our map, we talked about the difference between the staff and the worker.
That was a joke.
on a lighter note. But hey, the worker, the Nigerian worker, sees a lot, has to go through a lot. And sometimes the Nigerian worker is somewhat negligent, but then the Nigerian worker is also very hardworking. What are the conditions that they have to work in? One of our correspondents have done several reports over the weekend. Victoria did a report on a day in the life of a medical doctor in Nigeria. Mm-hmm. We talked about the fact that the ratio, the globally recommended ratio is 1 doctor to about 600 patients. But in Nigeria, we have about 1 doctor to about 10,000 or thereabout. And that is extremely not acceptable because it puts a strain on the individual. But in all of this, what are the laws that ensure that the worker functions effectively? What are those conditions? What are the labor unions even doing? How much of advocacy are the labor unions doing? And how much of awareness and accountability are they doing for themselves? So here in the studio, we have the president of the Petrol and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association, that's Pengerson, and also the president of the Trade Union Congress, Mr. Festus Osifo. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Or should I say Comrade Osifo?
Yes, Comrade Osifo. Yeah, keep it short. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you for joining.
You're still wearing the Comrade attire?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Once a Comrade, always a Comrade.
Yes, of course.
Happy Workers' Day.
Thank you so much. Happy Workers' Day, Nigerians. And happy Workers' Day to all of us.
So real quick, how happy is this Workers' Day celebration?
So Workers' Day is actually a day of happiness, a day of reflection as well, to look at the journey in the last 1 year. How have we fared as Nigerian workers? And you will quite agree with me that the last 1 year has not been quite interesting in the life of Nigerian workers due to the various level of difficulties and hardship that we have faced. But we'll get down to that much later. But amidst all these, it is 1 day in 365 days that workers do have to reflect on the contributions that they have had to the growth of the economy and to the sustenance of the nation. So for us, we are quite happy that we live to see today.
Well, in the last 1 year, we witnessed, isn't the last one, I hope I'm not wrong on this one, the minimum wage. You know, there was a review of the minimum wage upwardly, but it does appear that the gains of that have been eroded with high cost of living, you know, inflation, inflationary pressures, etc. I'm wondering, is there new conversation going on around? Can there be new conversation going on around that? Because we know that this is supposed to be something that happens every 5 years or so. But looking at just what has happened and how quickly gains have been eroded, do you think that there needs to be an amendment or at least a proviso given to that 5-year amendment clause?
Yes, you are very correct, Malkwe. We've had, you know, if you remember, in 2019, just as you have alluded to, so we moved from about 18,000 naira minimum wage to somewhere around 30,000 naira. So if you check that 30,000 naira, as at then, if you check the value of 30,000 could give you like 2, 3, 4 bags of rice as at 2019. So, but today, where are we relating to that? You know, again, we say we spend naira, but literally everything we consume in the country, you know, we don't produce, we import literally everything. So when you check the value of that 30,000 naira, as at then, the dollar was somewhere around about 300 or 350. So if you check it, it was approximately $100. But today, if you marry that vis-a-vis what is happening in the parallel market, it is around, if you take 30,000 vis-a-vis 750, it's somewhere around $50. So what that means, yes, it's even lesser than that. So what that means is that the exchange rate has actually affected the value of the naira, which literally determine the purchasing power in the market. So today, we are in a real crisis. Today, the purchasing power of the average Nigerian workers has depleted. So that is why I we have been clamoring that the 5 years that you put in there, because the spate of inflation is quite high. You are having average of 20% inflation on an annual basis for a salary that is not increasing. Okay. So when you put that, you see that the money has literally eroded. So what we are advocating, like as it's done in every other industry in Nigeria, we do have a 2 years CBA negotiations, but in between 2 years, you have opportunity to look at salary adjustment. So this should be done more frequently than the 5 years that we have today.
Okay, let's introduce another worker who will join this conversation. Ilesami Jayoba, Professor of Industrial Relations and Human Resource Management, member of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management, member Nigerian Institute of Training and Development, and fellow Chartered Institute of Public Management, who joins us virtually. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Jayoba.
Thank you very much.
Real quick, the Nigerian worker, the question we asked just before you came into the studio had to do with the minimum wage as introduced 2019 and what it's been like. When you joined, Mr. Osifo, Comrade Osifo was talking about the fact that what inflation has done to the minimum wage is inflation and exchange rate has caused that minimum wage to go below less than half of what its value used to be when it came on in 2019. But for one who looks at all of this with a bird's eye view, would you say the Nigerian worker deserves a review in less than 5 years, as our law says? The minimum wage is reviewed every 5 years. Mr. Osifo has said it should be done more or less every 2 years. And in between that, there should be a look at it, how the dynamics, economic dynamics, social dynamics affect the minimum wage as we go forward.
Thank you very much for having me. Comrade Osifo has mentioned something very crucial and he cut across all pillars of activities where there is employment in Nigeria. Workers are earning relatively low wage compared to international average. I think Nigerian workers should be earning one of the best wages, especially when we look at surveys that have been done at our own end. Also, for instance, so wages of workers globally, and it was laughing what Nigerian lecturers think. And I think that can be extrapolated to all the other sectors. Now, the review of minimum wage will go at par with the inflationary trend ordinarily. Because collective bargaining is a statutory arrangement, can't do that every other time. The 5-year limit experience has shown that not realistic, because in a situation of unstable exchange rate, fiscal policy, particularly pushing inflation over and above the projected reality, there should be a mechanism that allows wage to be adjusted, as Paripa show with inflationary trend. One way of doing this is to probably emulate what happens in the private sector. They have a way of internally adjusting wage. But we know indeed that the civil service, statute bar, and the fact that procedures for adjusting wages are cumbersome. There are two mechanisms for addressing wages to meet up with inflationary trend. Perhaps everybody looking at certain allowances, like you are looking at housing, you are looking at transport, as wages are eroded. So if there can be a mechanism to adjust at least at those levels, then workers happier for it. I had comments of Comrade that the situation of the Nigerian worker not very palatable, and that's the reality. That this, there should be a way of addressing this issue.
Indeed, Professor Jayoba, we'll see how we can correct your audio. We're really struggling to hear a bit of what it is that you're saying. But let me come to Mr. Festus, or Comrade Osifo, right here in our studios. I'm looking at the front page of the Vanguard newspapers this morning, and part of what they're talking, I mean, the lead story is on May Day and the plight. I always feel, you know, it's always so sad to see the plight of the Nigerian worker. We're not talking about, when you use the word plight, it's not used in very favorable light. And to use that in association with people who should be able to provide for themselves, provide for their families, contribute positively to the economy is not exactly, you know, it's really heartbreaking, so to speak. And so I think it's former Comrade Ayuba Waba who used to talk about the working poor, you know, people whose wages were not enough to take them anywhere. I'm looking at, you know, the history where the you know, this idea of Workers' Day came from, Labor Day, as it's called in some other places, which was to, you know, the idea around Marxism, the fact that people should be able to benefit from the good, from the common good which they work for. How are you, I mean, how have we shifted? You know, right now it's no longer about, you have to ask whether this is still about ideology or whether this is just about, this is a tradition that was handed down. We now know that, you know, we now live in a largely capitalist environment. Oftentimes when demands are made, they're usually made of government. But, you know, how is the new labor movement, the labor movement of today, still trying to stick with the ideology that drove workers of the times past to be able to evolve ideas such as Workers' Day, you know, equitable wages, how will I put it now, even the 8-hour working day. I know that recently the TUC hosted a dinner and some of the things you alluded to, the fact that, you know, workers pushed for certain things that will be treated equally with other workers in our own country. How have we kept these ideals? Are we still keeping to them, or have the labor unions gone to sleep?
Yeah, basically, you could, one of the, you know, in 1886, that was when May 4th, 1886 was when they had the Chicago riots, the Haymarket riots in the US. So fighting to say that we should, you know, before then, you go to work, you don't know when you close. You go to work, you spend 16 hours at work. When you come back home, you are tired, a lot of people fall sick and all that. So that was when the labor movement then in the United States started the agitation of the 8 hours work that led to the riot and lots of deaths that was recorded then. But drawing that home, the struggle of labor movement has been enormous. So it cut across different industries, from the issues of decent work to issues of working environment. You go to some offices, you see where Nigerian workers are carrying out their daily functions. It's abysmal. So these issues have been there over the years. Like the issue you also alluded to, that before now, they've been telling us, mostly multinational companies, that Nigerian workers cannot occupy some certain positions. So we have moved past a lot of these, because Nigerian workers today, they are occupying a lot of sensitive positions, cutting across different industries. But now, in the face of labor, you know, the advocacy has been enormous. One, in terms of government policies. When government comes up with obnoxious policies, labor, as you can recall, has been at the forefront, you know, has been championing the plight and the cause of the Nigerian masses and the Nigerian people. So this has been done consistently over the years. Now, if you look at different industries, we have peculiar issues cutting across these different industries. That is why you have the trade unions in a particular industry representing the plight of workers. In the construction sector, in the medical sector, in the textile sectors and all that. But the Nigerian workers have been faced with, or rather, the trade unions, we've had some peculiar issues compared to some other part of the world. For example, if you go to a place like Angola, they have some robust laws in Angola that protect the workforce, that protect the workers. But our labor law here in Nigeria, it's over 30 years old. So what we have been championing in the last few years is the review of some of those laws, because you cannot be operating a law in 2023 that was a decree of 1986. So these are some of the things we have been championing. So we have had committees, both from the NLC, TUC, Ministry of Labour, to try and review this. But today, this administration is almost going out, and that law has not seen the light of day. So for us, we felt that we should attack some of these things from the policy standpoint and from the laws, not just going every day and asking for salary increment alone, without creating the necessary framework, without looking at the environment with which Nigerian workers are working. Because today, you have different strata of workforce. You have some that they call the contract staff. Then that contract staff is doing even more serious job than the one that you call permanent staff. So these are some of the issues that we want the labor laws to address, so that employers of labor will not continuously, trample on the right of an average Nigerian worker. And we believe when this next administration come on board, is one of the things we are going to champion from day one. In fact, when we met with the president-elect at a time when he was campaigning, it was part of a charter of demand that Nigerian workers gave to him, that these are some of the things you must address once you come on board. So we are currently engaging people around him. When he comes on board, it is number one thing that Labour is going to champion. Let's address some of these issues from the policy standpoint and also from the laws that are guiding the Labour movement.
You are aware that, oftentimes coming up with policy, much as it's a big deal, I mean, to come up with policies and what, and I know just what a Herculean task it can be to, get laws passed. You really have to have a very strong resolve to see them through in the National Assembly. However, we know that that is just a small part of the work. Implementation is usually where the problem lies. And even for the laws that we currently have, in terms of even implementing it to ensure that, most workers are treated fairly, especially at the lower rung. Yes, our workers are equal, but some are more equal than others. There are people who are really, really affected by the unfair policies of a number of, will I say, firms and even government policies. So how are the labor unions bringing these issues to light? For instance, those working in the manufacturing sector, in plants, those working in construction. We've seen a lot of construction coming in through loans that we get from China, and the fact that oftentimes the Chinese come with not just those loans, they also come with their workers, doing things that Nigerians are able to do. So and we know that our laws presently, look after some of these things. How are we looking at implementing the ones that our laws currently look after?
Yes, Malkwe, it will surprise you to note that most of the laws that we have today governing the labor, it's not actually, it's not representative enough. I bet to say you have to have a look at the labor law. You will discover that most of these workers are not protected. Since that law was passed, or since that decree was promulgated several years ago, we've had a lot of ILO conventions. Most of these ILO conventions are not domesticated. But let me take it clearly down home on the issue that, about the implementation of even the laws we have, like the minimum wage. The minimum wage is a law, right? So we ought to have implemented it to the latter. But a lot of states today are not paying minimum wage. Some states today, as we speak, they are paying half salaries to the workers. But these states, we've had a lot of issues. We've had strikes, the state councils in those respective states, NLC, TUC, they have gone on strike to demonstrate. They have even submitted areas that we think government could improve their wages. We have submitted, various areas that we have noted that these various governments, that they are wasting money, that when they cut down costs in those various areas, that they could be able to churn up some of the funds, or more possible of the funds that they will use in addressing the plight of workers. But instead, they are still continuing that line. And strike is always a last resort. Before we go on strike, we come together, we put on documents, we put on, what we think will work, and we engage them. So we have some states today that they negotiated, and they are paying half of the salary that they ought to pay. We will not even talk about the plight of pensioners. You talked about the dinner that was hosted by TUC. Part of what we did, we got application from the 36 states that they are doing good. We said, no, They are not. We went to Nigerian Union of Pensioners. We asked them, give us a submission of how your plight as pensioners are being taken care of. We just have return from about 3 or 4 states that told us that, okay, this state, that state, they are paying gratuity and that they are paying pension as I went due. That was why we now narrowed down from the 36 states. We had just 4 states that we now gave that recognition on that particular day. And we also felt that Nigerian workers are not celebrated enough. Because we work every day and we forget to tell ourselves thank you. So that was why the National Administrative Council and the NEC of TUC took that decision to say, let us honor Nigerian workers by celebrating ourselves.
You know, the other side is how much are the Nigerian workers actually celebrating themselves? If you put out that survey across the state to say, how are you faring? And you got feedback from only 3 or 4. How are the Nigerian workers actually celebrating themselves? You know, when we started, I talked about accountability. Are the workers even holding themselves accountable in terms of productivity? You talked about the laws. Amakwe asked you the implementation of the laws as they are. Is a Nigerian worker delivering his own side of that law as it is before you even go on to say the government is not delivering his own side? How accountable is a Nigerian worker?
Yes. You know, first of all, for you to work, the environment must be created. We are here now, we could see the beautiful environment. Look at your beautiful studio. But you could go to some of these stations owned by government or government institutions, it will be dilapidated. So first of all, the tools must be provided to work. The environment must be conducive. I beg to tell you that go to some of the state ministries. You can't even enter there. When you come in, you see everywhere smelling. When you come in, you see that the tools to work are not there. It's just like the Nigerian textile. Nigerian textile today, at a time, they were producing optimally. But if you go to Nigerian textile today, when the machines are bad, these things are not being repaired, funds are not made available. And at the end of the day, they will turn and start blaming the Nigerian workers. If you come to the oil and gas today, the people, 95 to 98% of the workforce in the oil and gas today are Nigerian workers, and they are delivering on a daily basis. It is a high-level technological environment, but Nigerian workers are delivering in that regard. Today, our doctors are sought after all over the world. They are delivering. So when you provide the right environment, when you provide the tools for the Nigerian workers to work, Nigerian worker will deliver. But if these things are not there, it is difficult. For example, you go to some offices, you don't even have something as simple as toilet. So, and you ask that person, when the person is pressed, what will the person do? Some of them will go back to their home to use their toilet. And that is man-hour loss. You will turn around and start blaming the Nigerian
go back to their home to use the toilet, yes, and may not come back to the office.
I know, they may come back. But again, they also need transport. So go back home and come at the same time. So you must first of all provide.
Both ways.
Yes, of course. You must first of all provide that environment.
Okay, our colleagues in Lagos have questions for you. Ayo.
Let me ask a question of you, Mr. Osifo. Well, Nyota asked this question comically earlier, but I think it deserves a little bit of attention. Drawing a difference between a worker and a staff. It sounds comical, but then we also know that when workers go on strike, some people don't. Some essential workers are at work as we speak, even though it's a public holiday. So how are these interests being taken care of holistically? So even though the question was asked comically, who is a staff and who is a worker, you may want to speak to how the interests of those who do not have the privilege of going on strike or going on holidays are taken care of in situations like this.
Yes, so for the staff, normally, what is done in most climes is that when you define essential workers, you know that if they go on strike, it totally cripples the economy. And that is not really the essence of strikes, so to say. So now, there is a way you design special allowances for them. There is a way that you ought to design, there are special privileges that should be accorded such staff. In fact, those are part of the things that will come in the new labor law law that we are proposing, it was part of the proposals that the labor centers, NLC and TUC, submitted to say that when you have essential staff, how do we protect them? How do we give them that special status? And also, how are their allowances enhanced? Because someone who goes to work when there is strike, someone who even work beyond the normal working hours because his or her job is essential, someone that cannot even go home except somebody is there to relieve him or her of that duty. So at the end of the day, the protection today is not that enormous, but in the labor law, it was part of the labor law currently under review. It was part of the proposals that we made, that there must be some special allowance that is accorded to such person. And again, after the strike, when the condition permits, that person should also be given some level of days off for the person to rest, because it is not just about the allowance. It is not just about extra money. No. But that person should also have time to recuperate. For example, you have people working extended hours. So normally, if you work extended hours, there should also be time that will be given to you that is called time off for you to rest at home. If you check people that are working on shift, they work 12 hours. So some work 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., then the other from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. So after a while, they are being compensated by giving some time off. So these are all the measures that will be defined in the new law that we are pushing. Just what Maokwe said earlier, for us, we know that it's difficult to pass laws in Nigeria, but it is the onus now rests on us to ensure that the 10th National Assembly do what is right, and we must also hold those in the executive accountable. So, Ayo, some of all these we will take care of in the law that is currently under review that we think we can fast track moving forward. But for now, our advocacy is that there should be special allowance and there should be some level of special status designed for this set of people. Then government is trying to add a lot of other services to this essential, to be classified as essential. But you know, we also see that as a gimmick, because by the time you classify all work as essential, it means that strike can no longer hold. But that clearly will not be possible.
Indeed. Comrade, that's a lot to reflect on, really, and the labor movement has its work cut out for it in defining, you know, all of those areas. But watching your Trade Union Congress Awards yesterday, you know, gave me also a lot to think about. I would have thought that it should have been tinged with a lot more activism. But then again, it didn't feel like Nigerian workers were celebrating themselves. It felt more like it was a reward for the political elite who should, you know, be getting more of the pressure, you know, to look at the state of the Nigerian workers. And visibly absent as a talking point at that awards and dinner yesterday was the diminishing value of the 30,000 naira minimum wage. Perhaps you'll have time to respond to that, you know, while you're talking about this more important point, which is casualization of the workforce, particularly in federal government institutions. And I wonder if the new labor law that you're proposing will cover that. We'll find that in some health institutions, you know, some areas where I have worked in investigative journalism, casualization is ongoing, and to the effect that many of these workers who have put in years of work, as much as 10 years, are not rewarded. Their allowances are withheld. I wonder if there is provision for an abolition of casualization to the extent that if they have worked for 7 years, they're absorbed into the system and they're giving full benefits.
Okay, thank you so much for that question. No, the idea of the dinner that was organized was very broad. 1, to celebrate Nigerian workers. 2, to celebrate employers of labor that are pro-workforce. Then also, both in public and private sector. So it was carefully thought out. Now, we celebrated a lot of Nigerian workers were celebrated across the industries. You had a driver, for us, driving is a decent job. It's a decent work all over the world. But here in Nigeria, we tend to commonize it. A driver, for example, was one of the workers that was celebrated on that day. You have an office secretary. She was one of the Nigerian workers that was celebrated on that day. You have Nigerian workers cutting across different strata, both from the high end and, in quote, the low end. They were all celebrated. But we also took a decision that in order to set precedent for the incoming government, for most especially the state governors, we identify some states that are paying minimum wage. We identify some states that are not owing salaries. We identify some states that are not owing pension. So we felt, and there were just about 4 of them. So 4 of them, we brought them together, and we also gave them an award. The reason we're doing that is to prick the conscience of the other states that actually wanted the award, because all the states, literally, they wrote to us that they are the best. But when we verified using our apparatus, we discovered that no, it's not true. It's just narrowed down to 4. So those 4 were actually given an award. So the reason we did that was to prick the conscience of others that are not acting rightly. Then coming to the private sectors, some captains of industries, they were also awarded. The various affiliate unions of TUC came and they told us, okay, this person has done this. So we set a clear-cut criteria. For example, the GCO of NNPC was awarded. The reason we also did that was because if you have any friend in NNPC today, ask the person, what was their plight in terms of welfare, in terms of allowances, in terms of remuneration about 2 years ago, and what is their plight today? If you remember the PIA that we just implemented, today there is no single individual that lost his or her job in the oil and gas industry as a result of the implementation of PIA. So when you have people that are pro-workforce, people that are pro-worker, who sat down, have some discussions, and increase the salaries of its employees by over 80 to 100%, for us, that is what we are encouraging. For us, that is what we are actually advocating. So such employers of labor, they were also recognized. The reason we did that is because you have thousands of others who are not doing what they are doing. So we narrowed the number down. So beyond that as well, at the end of the day, we felt that when you have workers, you also have employers of labor. So we must be able to situate all together to ensure that when we reward those that have done well, it's also a signal for those that are not doing well to sit up. And that is why we are going to make this an annual thing.
Casualization, please, as briefly as you can. Okay,
the issue of casualization, yes, that's correct. Yeah, the issue of casualization, yes, we have been, the various trade unions, you will never see any trade union gathering that we don't talk about the issue of casualization. But we realized that in doing this, it's various trade unions across all sectors. We have been championing this. Is it the hotel sector? Is it the construction sector? Is it the textile sector? Is it the civil service or petroleum sector or the banking sector? We have been advocating this over the years. Now, we felt that one of the ways with which this could be addressed holistically is to have a national policy on it that could also be domesticated as a law, because we have ILO convention that talked about casualization. So we felt that the best way to address this, as done in a lot of other climes, is coming down to the law. We would now ensure that in the laws, but the rights of workers are protected. It is easy because in our current law, you don't have a law today that understand the issues and completely dealt with the issues. So in that law that is currently under review, this is one of the things that we have championed. But beyond that as well, in other climes, you have the labor movement and the Ministry of Labor partnering to fight the issues of casualization. But the various trade unions, they've done their best. But do we have a lot of room for improvement? The answer is yes. Today, if you go to banking sector, literally all the tellers working in bank, they are casual staff. But they sit down there at times, they don't even have 10 minutes to stand up. They sit down from 8 a.m. to about 5 or 6 p.m. And at the end of the day, you give them peanuts when they are going home at the end of a month. This is not justifiable, and this is totally wrong. So for us, even as we attack them, even as the various trade unions in those sectors are advocating, are pushing, we need a national consensus on this. We need a law that will also strengthen us. Yes, we say in Nigeria, we always like writing laws, but as labor, once we have it written in the law, it is easier for us to carry out picketing. It is easier for us to carry out push across board. So first of all, let's start from that, then we will now drive it home. But on our path, on the part of TUC, we have continuously advocated that the issue of casualization should be abolished. Yes, in other parts of the world, you have what they call outsourcing. But the way outsourcing is done in other climes is quite different from the way outsourcing is done in Nigeria. In fact, in some countries, people do not want to be regular staff. They prefer to cater for themselves all around. And what they earn when those jobs are sourced in other parts of the world is even much more than what the regular staff earn. Because when you pay them, you don't need to bother about hospitals, you don't need to bother about their gratuity, you pay them everything at the end of the month. They earn ×2 when compared to what regular staff are earning. So some people do not want to be regular staff. They prefer to be the outsourced staff. But here in Nigeria, the reverse is the case. Because those casual staffs, those outsourced staff, they earn abysmally. And it's something that all stakeholders must come together to address.
All right, thank you. Let's get back to Professor Jayoba. Professor Jayoba, these are a matter of casualization of staff and the laws as they are in Nigeria. I mean, the comrade is talking about the fact that the incoming administration would have to look into it seriously, since the current administration did not pay much attention to that. But for one who is a policy and implementation person, how do you think government should go about looking at the laws, the labor laws in Nigeria, and implementing those laws?
This law to be reviewed with particular reference to casualization. It's obvious now that one of the ways that some organizations are indulged or reduced overhead is to seek certain level of the operation for casual workers to carry out. So in a way, it is just a way of swallowing the big meat, whereas you just give the bones to this category of workers. So they are being treated, they have no rights as it is, and these are people that you categorize as precarious workers because they practically live from hand to mouth, and their jobs are largely insecure. They can be asked to go at any time because they do not even have a contract of employment. Now, the way to go is to see whether casualization can be...
Professor Jayoba, I really want to crave your indulgence. The audio from your end is not good at all, and we would endeavor to work it out and get back to you, but so far I want to thank you for your contribution. Mr. Sivo, the question I asked you earlier, and I also alluded to that, was I asked you a question about how the staff themselves, how the workers themselves carry themselves. Yes, you answered to say when the right environment is provided, then the workers will give their best. But in this country, there have been reports and there have been times when the right environment is provided, but the workers are not carrying themselves as they should. For instance, we talked about the fight against corruption, and there are those who will tell you that if you want to fight corruption, go into the Nigerian civil service. They are also workers. But then, the decay, where you see a civil servant owning estates in the country, how do you account for that?
The Nigerian worker is part of the entire Nigerian environment. So the Nigerian worker does not live in space. Nigerian worker lives in Nigeria. So now, if you in any country where you don't have consequence management, in any country where people live above the law, you have issues like this. You have a Nigerian, he lives here in Nigeria, he jumps queues, he does all manner of things. But when that Nigerian gets abroad, he obeys the law. The reason that Nigerian obeys the law abroad is because he or she is scared that if the law is broken, that the system will hold such person accountable.
Or that he has nobody to call to come to his aid.
So for us as unions, we don't shield any Nigerian worker that is found culpable in any regard. You have never held the labor centers, you have never held any trade union coming out to shield a Nigerian worker that is found wanting. So all we are saying is that the same stick you are using to hold Nigerian workers accountable, you should also use same stick to hold the political elite and the political class accountable in such a way that if the laws are broken, it must be addressed. There must be consequence management. There is no country that can develop when you don't have a system of deterrence, when everybody does whatsoever they like and they go scot-free. So we must create that system. So for us, we will not shield any Nigerian workers. Anybody that does not go to work to deliver his or her functions, there must be a system of accountability. But like as I've said earlier, the right environment must be created and also the tools must be provided for the Nigerian worker to carry out its or her function.
Just going to ask you if you have a message. It's supposed to be Happy Workers' Day. For Nigerian workers, you'd like to give them a word or two?
Yeah, thank you so much. To the Nigerian workers, we quite appreciate all that you have done for this country. We quite appreciate all you do on a daily basis, even amidst the difficult economy, even amidst the reduction of the purchasing power, even amidst the insecurity. You carry out jobs, you carry out functions, you go to farm on a daily basis, even when you are not sure of coming back home. But one thing that will assure you is that let's keep hope alive because we will continuously work for you on a daily basis. Today is your day. Go about and celebrate. Go about, have the best of food, have the best of drink, and let's hope for the best. And to the incoming government, we want to address you that you must carry out functions to ensure that the plight of Nigerian workers are addressed. Because Nigerian workers are the people behind the GDP we reel out every day. Because without the workforce, no wheel will turn. Thank you so much.
Well, Comrade Festus Osifo, President, Petroleum and Natural Gas Senior Staff Association of Nigeria, Pengasyn, and also President of the Trade Union Congress of Nigeria. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Today this morning.
Thank you so much.
And Happy Workers' Day to you.
Thank you. Happy Workers' Day as well. Thank you so much.
Well, we'll take a break at this point and we'll be talking about data and statistics. Remember, a census was supposed to hold. We've been told it's been rescheduled. Some people say only parts of it have been rescheduled. What parts have been rescheduled and what parts are still ongoing? In just a moment, please stay with us.
Some identities cannot be mistaken, like your business name and your account name. Your business name if it be shoe place, then the account now, color can remove. If I see them, I block them straight. You don't understand? Don't confuse your customers. Sign up for a Money Point business account today and get a business account in your business name in minutes from your shop banker. Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Whatever it takes to make sure you have a business account opened in your business name, we'll do it as your sure banker. Open a bank account in your business name with Money Point.
Hi, I'm Pato Rankin, and they don't call me World Best for no reason. I only deal with the best, be it auto or business. 100% claim is always guaranteed.
Welcome to World Class Insurance Services. We are Anchor Insurance.
Where insurance truly works. The 2020
2023 census is something that is a process that has started. So you can't really postpone something that has started, but it's only a part of it that has been rescheduled. So we want to provide explanation around that. But maybe if you call it reasons, we'll do that. The second one is to also guide against misconception, misrepresentation around this issue of postponement. We believe that we can count on you to take the right message here and explain things as they are. So that's the second reason. And the third and final one is to appraise you of the next step ahead. The statement by the Honorable Minister of Information actually talked about this. That's the President has directed that preparation for the 2023 census should continue.
It is official. The 2023 census has been postponed. Well, some say it's part of it has been postponed, but well, the new date for the 2023 census would be announced, hopefully by the incoming administration. The last census was held in 2006. What does this say? I mean, having heard the conversations we've had so far over since last year has been about it's a date, it is fixed, whereas it was moved from March because of the elections down to the month of May, and now it's been shifted. Why? What parts of the census have been shifted? What parts are still going on? All of this we're hoping we'll get answers to, and we're being joined in the studio by the Chairman, Public Affairs Committee of the National Population Commission, Honorable Federal Commissioner, National Population Commission of your state, Dr. Eyitayo Oyetinji. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure and honor to be a part of your program.
You know, the last time you were in the studio, I asked this question. I said, would the census hold? And you said, yes.
And I still say the same thing.
You still say yeah, the same thing?
Census will hold.
But it's been shifted.
It's a matter of date.
That's a political answer to a very unpolitical question. But let's look at this. Why was the census postponed?
Well, the census was rescheduled by Mr. President after consultations with several stakeholders, including the National Population Commission. As you do recall, the census should have taken place earlier, had to be shifted because of the rescheduling of the elections. Now, we had hoped that that rescheduling would not affect the census proper. But as it turned out, the more we got closer to the handover date, the more we were worried that we were getting too close to the handover date. And I want to imagine that one of the reasons that Mr. President rescheduled the census was that it was getting too close to the handover date. And since the major aim of the census is to plan, for the development programs of government, I'm sure Mr. President felt that the incoming government should be a part of the process. That they are going to be the major user and beneficiary of the census. I want to imagine that that's one of the major reasons. So, like you noted, a substantial part of the census process has been concluded. We were just set to go out to the field for house numbering, building numbering and household listing, and then the actual enumeration process.
If I may interrupt, a substantial part.
Yes.
Please explain what substantial part of the census process has been concluded.
For every census, every modern census, you start by demarcating the entire country into units that can be covered during the census. It's like counting money. You want to count ₦1 million. If you choose to start counting them 1, 2, 3, you get mixed up. So you segregate. Our people in the FCT have a way of putting the money in batches like that. So you segregate the country into units that enumerators can cover. That we have done using the most modern technology. With that kind of foundation, because in what we did during the enumeration area demarcation, we more or less took a census of all the buildings in Nigeria, got them into a database, numbered them, identified their locations, identified the estimated households in each of those buildings, got their GPS locations. So all that you do during a census is to go back to each of those buildings that are residential and then enumerate the households that are there. So once you've gotten that foundation, you have it's more or less a done deal.
Mm. You know, every time I hear the word census, and I'm not so old, even though, yes, well, I'm approaching middle age now. Every time, and I think maybe that's also the attitude of the average Nigerian towards census, because that's what has always bedeviled our census. The fact that when, you know, the figures eventually come out, there is this distrust for the figures that come out of census. And we saw the last time we conducted the census is in 2006. 2006 is what I remember. You can correct us if there was another census. I do recall that the governor of Lagos State, or much later, under the administration of Governor Fashola, was talking about how in 2006 they had other state enumerators follow. It was supposed to be, a help they were given, assisting the real enumerators on the ground. But at the same time, they were also taking their own count. So by the time the National Population Commission was done with its own census and releasing Lagos for, you know, all the states of the Federation, there was a huge dispute between the Lagos state government and the federal government as to what the federal government said the population of Lagos State was and what the Lagos State government said the population of Lagos was. And these are the kinds of controversy we've seen over and over again, especially because population is something that is used to allocate resources in our country. How do you intend to, get over that trust barrier to be able to conduct census in a manner that by the time we're done, we don't think, oh, this has been a waste of resources, or that people feel that, no, I wasn't counted, or that, you know, people feel that, again, the federal government has conjured figures. How do you intend to get over that barrier?
Well, you said in the beginning that because of the mistrust, even before you go into the census, people already have a prejudice. They don't think it's going to be successful. They don't think it's going to be honest. They don't think all of that.
So it's something you're aware of?
Yes, everyone is aware of that. And that's why we attempt to create a lot of awareness. We do a lot of public enlightenment. That, unfortunately, was hampered by the recent elections. We were careful not to get too engaged in public campaigns, enlightenment and all that, that will give the impression that we're part and parcel of the electioneering process. But now that we have some space, we're going to do a lot of public enlightenment. The first is to de-emphasize issues of political representation and sharing of resources as tied to the census itself, and emphasize the purpose of the census for planning, and not just figures, not just numbers. The information that is collected during censuses go far beyond numbers. And that's why when people talk about other data as being substitute for a census, we simply smile. Because in a census, the kind of information you collect cuts across a lot of categories that will help any government to plan. So first is public enlightenment. The census is not just about I'm more than you, you are more than me, and all of that. It's first for accountability. You want to hold even government accountable. You said you have done this, you have done this, but this information that is coming out of the census shows that this has not been done. So census is actually for the benefit of the people, not just in terms of I am more than you. If you're more than me, what have you done with the numbers? Have you used that information to improve the welfare of the people and all of that? So census should not be looked at as matters for figures and so on. Then there are certain trajectories, beliefs that we have been moving this way, it should be this way and so on. The census we are working on this time around is technology driven, it's verifiable. And like I told you, we're using technologies, for example, that include satellite imageries. Starting with the enumeration area demarcation, we have right now a database of all the buildings in Nigeria. They are pictures, not sketches. So everyone who is enumerated, except for a few that are homeless, are going to be tied to identifiable buildings where they reside. You can always go back and verify. As a matter of fact, by the time we get to the level of data dissemination, we're going to have situations where you can see your building, you will recognize this is my building, you punch it, and it brings out data on everyone that lives there, except their personal information, of course.
I hope that...
With that verifiable background, we are hoping that Nigerians will trust this census more than anyone before.
I hope that those buildings, you also took into cognizance the empty ones. Like, we know that in some towns, like Abuja, you have a lot of houses that are empty, not occupied. But before now, you said that you imagine that the postponement was tied to the proximity to the handover date.
One of the reasons.
One of the reasons. Yes. But before now, your chairman has said there were 4 reasons why the census is being delayed. He said 1, funding; 2, funding; 3, funding; and 4, security. Do you have the funds you need for this census?
Yes, that statement was made actually by the Honorable Minister of State for Budget.
Do you have the funding you need for the census?
Yes, the census is a process. At every stage, you carry out the activity. The way funding is done in government is not to come and put money in a particular agency resting there without being utilized. At every stage that you need to do a certain activity, the funds for that activity are released to you. For us in NPC, this government has really tried. Looking at the conduct of elections and the census, these are huge capital-intensive projects. And for every stage we have had to go through the process, the government has been funding us. We've gone beyond the enumeration area demarcation. We've conducted pre-tests, 2 of them. We've conducted a trial census.
Have you done the recruitment of those enumerators and the training?
Yes.
The last time we had a guest who told us the training hadn't started.
The training is was an ongoing process at different levels. We had trained those who will train the functionaries at the last level. We have recruited them. And I must use this opportunity to express regret to many of them, because many who had received our training were excited with the content of this census and were looking forward to actually being part of it. And I'm sure that a lot of them will have been disappointed by this delay. So we regret that and apologize for those who are looking forward. And of course, there are many Nigerians who had planned programs and so on.
Okay, so you're saying...
But at every level that we had to do whatever we needed to do, government had provided funds.
You're saying categorically that this postponement is not related in any way to funding issues?
I'm not in a position to make categorical statement. The census was rescheduled by Mr. President.
So following a recommendation from the NPC, true or false?
Following a discussion with the
NPC. Okay. My colleagues in Lagos have questions. Sorry. Ayo and Buki.
Well, thank you, Nyota. We do have a guest with us here as well. Professor Onikpade Wusu is Professor of Sociology and Demography of the Department of Sociology at the Lagos State University. Thank you for joining us this morning, Prof.
Thank you for inviting me.
Elections have been postponed. But The one major question that beg your pardon, census has been postponed. I mean, it goes back to what Mr. Dr. Etunji said. I mean, sometimes you find it difficult not confusing the two.
Yeah.
But what, in your opinion, were the conditions precedents that we should have embarked upon that are outstanding now? Area demarcation has been done twice. 2 stages of that has been done. Yeah. What other conditions were outstanding or are still outstanding from what you think we should have done that we haven't?
I think if I got your questions right,
yeah,
we are yet to conduct house numbering in our house. That's outstanding. And then the re-enumeration, those are the 2 stages left.
Okay.
Yes, I think we're about to, because I'm also involved in a way.
Okay.
We're about to conduct the house numbering and house listing aspects, which should precede the enumeration exercise proper. So that was what we were preparing for. Before the rumor, it is not holding, it will be this and that. In fact, I think also the local government level training. We were to conduct local government level training where the enumerators will be trained by those that have been trained at the state level. So just to bring it down to their level. That one is still outstanding.
But what
if that's what you want me to?
Well, yeah, I mean, those ones, how significant are they in the course? Because I asked that because, I mean, one of the things that we have been told is that you have been area enumeration and demarcation has been done.
Yes.
So what's the difference between enumeration and numbering? I mean, if they had already been counted, I assume that's what enumeration means.
No, yes, enumeration is counting the people.
Okay.
Taking note of their characteristics and all other things. They will read the people. But what has been done is about the demarcating the whole of Nigeria into manageable sizes, where we'll send enumerators to, to do the recounting. And that is also, geofencing is involved. You cannot move from your own area to another area it's technology driven. That I'm aware of.
I'd also say that significant or appreciable communication is missing as well. Because, I mean, for instance, just a quick one. How many minutes will you be spending with one person?
That cannot be estimated. It depends, it depends on the willingness on the part of...
How many questions are for each person?
There are several questions, but the questions, they are electronic questions.
How many questions per person on the average?
On
30
the average,
questions?
That I can't provide. But
is it more than 30?
It will be more than 30. It should be more than 30.
More than 30 questions per person?
Per person.
Okay.
It should be more than that.
Okay. Now, if we're going to be asking...
Just to add to that very quickly, Ayo, even if you have 30 questions per person, you're deploying technology this time around, a sort of manual method of testing. Yeah. So the estimated amount of time you'll be spending on one person should be
less than
exactly. Yes. Okay. So can you please explain that process to us?
Well, in terms of, if you are still insisting on the time, I cannot, provide a time frame in terms of so minutes to be spent. But I do know that with technology, it shouldn't take that much for an enumerator to engage a respondent, that is a Nigerian, or wherever you are in the country, engage you on the questions and just ensure the questions are you filled in the online questionnaire and upload.
10 minutes per person?
Away. It shouldn't be up to that.
About 7 minutes per person?
I think approximately, but I can't provide.
Multiplied by 200 million?
Yes,
okay.
Of course, there are several enumerators.
That will probably give us the number of days and all of that. But the question that I really want to ask you on that one is, communication is significantly missing. If you're going to be asking people questions that are personal, they need to know why those questions are necessary to be asked. If no one is talking to them now, then it means that we have to budget time for the communication, for significant education so that people don't hold back anything.
I think that aspect, I perceive the commission did not consider that, and that must have been influenced like what Dr. Oyetunji or whatever has just said, maybe they didn't take note of that in fixing the date. That it should have been, for me, it would have been something earlier or something in the future. So that the aspect you are trying to avoid conflict with the electioneering and all that, you should have taken care of that at the planning stage so that you know when this thing will take place. If assuming the census took place last year, maybe middle last year, there won't be any conflict with the election and all that. So that aspect of campaign, advocacy and all that, purely lacking.
And I understand.
And that will affect people's attitude. Maybe I just illustrate with this. In Lagos State, we went out to kind of do practical aspect of, training our thing. People were not willing to attend to us because they were not aware. They didn't even know what census, what is it all about, and when is it going to. They were not aware, and that is, I think, a problem the commission did not take care of.
And it's understandable, the proximity to the general elections and the fact that, one aspect of the general elections was also postponed, and then we had supplementary elections. But that has since been concluded before the end of the month of March, and we've had a full month. So why was preparation also missing in between that time and when, the postponement was announced?
Maybe I should say the election has not really been concluded. Let's be honest. A lot of cases in the courts, a lot of Nigerians are, and I'm one of those Nigerians, disappointed and feeling, I don't want to say that one about the election.
But there isn't there isn't any concern anymore for information overload on the traditional and the social media. So preparations in terms of communication could have actually begun right after the conclusion of the physical aspect of the elections.
Maybe I should say that our minds, Nigerians are, if you agree with me, we are not in the right frame of mind to even accommodate whatever you are saying. So many Nigerians, if you say you want to say anything, maybe census, and you're putting it on, we just ignore because of the disappointment, we witnessed during the election. And that will live with us for a long time. For me, the best thing we would have done was to have held this census last year. That would have been the best. Or shift it to next year when the wounds would have been healed. The wounds are still there.
Since you say you're part of the team, is that some of the counsel that you're providing? Perhaps?
I think I have the opportunity to say it now. Subsequently, we shouldn't just bring the two major, activities together like that. And that maybe we should give some time. Maybe that's why the census has been postponed. Let's give some time for the wounds to be healed.
Okay.
I have another question for you. I wonder if Dr. Itayo will also be responding to it as well, which is the proximity to the handover dates to a new administration. How much of a problem is it, for the exercise? And is the consultation that Dr. Itayo talked about, is it inclusive of the team of the new administration? And is it going to sufficiently affect the exercise in terms of, change of personnel?
Thank you. I think we should start, we should go back to what I said earlier, that the elections are still not over yet fully. So in that respect, we know that the handing over whatever. But I don't really agree with the doctor who spoke, who is an internal person in the NPC. I'm not an internal person. Because it's APC government that is there, and it's APC that is still taking over. So I do not see the reason why the consultation would be a major issue.
Okay, perhaps it's by way of handover, so to speak.
But there is this, Dr. Itayo can provide inside information to that question.
It's still part of...
okay. But before we go to Dr. Oyetunji, Prof, by way of educating people, how important is the census? I ask that because when the information begins to go out, people will need to understand, including the elites, why this research is as important as we say it is, to the extent of spending $1.8 billion, is it million or billion dollars on the project. So why is it that important? Just so people understand.
That's a big question. And I had, maybe I should put it this way. Census is more important than even the election, even the general elections. I remember in one of my classes with my student, I was trying to, I tried to draw their attention to the importance of census vis-a-vis election. So it is very, very important for planning. The politics, we have to depoliticize census, actually, because, we're talking about, Dr. Itai was trying to address this. If we don't do that, we'll continue to have the problem we're having. But in terms of importance, it is census that gives of what we call database, national database. And if you want to plan, you need to plan. Your planning should be evidence-based. And where you can get that evidence, national evidence, there could be sample surveys and all that, but national, that everybody will be counted at the same time within the borders of Nigeria, it's through census you can do that. And that database will affect business, affect policy design, policy implementation, affect the economy, affect everything.
Social welfare and all of that.
Everything.
Now,
so it's very, very important.
Will every enumerated Nigerian in this census get a unique identity number of sorts?
We should have. We have that already.
I'm just asking, will the census also identify a unique number for each person?
Yes, a kind of what maybe... I don't want to call it identity number, but the census will definitely have, because if you're enumerated, your data will be uploaded, and that will be tied to you.
But I imagine that will also
may be a form of a kind of identification.
I imagine that will also be harmonized with the national identity number exercise embarked upon earlier on by this administration.
Yeah, eventually, it should be.
Well, there's so many questions to ask you, Prof. We'll probably have to have you some other time in this conversation. Professor Onipede Wusu is Professor of Sociology and Demography of the Department of Sociology, Lagos State University. Thank you so much.
I would like to add one point.
Please go ahead.
Okay. I think we did not consider the aspect of the last census of 2006, and this is 17 years. And I want to say this, that the regularity of census, Nigerian leaders and followers will begin to appreciate it every 10 years. That's what I mean by it. Now, we'll appreciate it if that day we are ready to be honest with ourselves, honest in planning, honest about our policy designs, honest about policy implementation, honest about the welfare of an average Nigerian. That's when that regularity will be guaranteed and will not be toiling with it the way we have been doing.
Food for thought for government at all levels.
And they're watching, I believe.
Oh, most certainly. Well, you had a question for Professor Yetunji. I beg your pardon, Dr. Yetunji.
Yeah, okay. I don't think we have time enough to ask Professor Yetunji that question.
Nyata.
Much, guys. Dr. Yetunji, thank you so much for coming this morning. But one of the things, just before you go, is to ask that question again. What about this matter of the influx of foreigners into the country? We talk about our borders being porous and all. Is that also taken into consideration in your planning?
Yes, it is. That's why this technology is good. Like I said, everyone will be enumerated where they reside. So you can't just come in and you're floating and then you're enumerated. You have to reside somewhere. The building is known. The building can be seen.
So among the questions is country of origin. Is that part of the question you're going to ask?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay.
And of course, we're taking into cognizance even the internal displacement that has taken place within the country. We're asking questions that will help to track how people have been displaced so that for those who are worried, you had the governor of Benue State and others that there have been some internal displacements. The questions will try to relocate those people to where they usually reside.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Itai Yetunji. He's the chairman, Public Affairs Committee, National Population Commission, and the Federal Commissioner representing Oyo State at the National Population Commission. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
And now it's time to look at what you have to say, your own contributions to the show. But first, this announcement.
Well, yes, indeed. We just received this announcement from the National Association of Nigerian Students saying that they're trying to, or they'd like to inform the general public that all the remaining Nigerian students have been evacuated from Khartoum on Sunday, the 30th of April. That's yesterday. There were a total of 26 buses, and each bus contained about 50 people. They say they continue to ask for everyone's prayers and hope that all the students are able to reach Nigeria safely. And they're forever grateful for our continuous support and prayers. That's signed by the Public Relations Officer Amal Mohammed Pantami. So just to say again that all the remaining Nigerian students have been evacuated from Khartoum, and that was done yesterday, the 30th of April, 2023. This announcement is coming from the National Association of Nigerian Students. So hopefully and prayerfully we'll be able to see the first set of evacuees, perhaps from Egypt down to Nigeria sometime this week.
And again, you have your mails and tweets coming in. This one's from Low After Cross, says, drastic situations require drastic measures to tackle. I wonder if other countries who have evacuated their nationals out of troubled Sudan followed all these diplomatic rules of engagement, culminating to clearance to save their citizens from danger.
And this one is from Yomi Olaniyo. He says, as we celebrate the sanctity and dignity in labor, I look forward to seeing honest reform, implementation and enforcement of labor laws. This day shouldn't be the usual rendition of fruitless, promising and eulogizing workers. An average Nigerian worker faces a mirage of challenges and deserves a better condition of service, both in the public and the private sectors. Both the staff and the worker should be celebrated equally.
And that's the show for today. We want to thank you for letting us be a part of your morning. Wishing you a fantastic Workers' Day celebration. I'm Neota Igbe.
Thank you for watching. I'm Maupelgo Yusuf.
Enjoy your day. I am Bukola Koka.
Is it okay to ask you to think about patriotism? I'm Amaya Makinde. Have a wonderful day.